BB48 Black family, race first. Welcome back to another episode of the School of Urban Philosophy, where we're always straight up, straightforward, and straight to the point. It's a beautiful night here in Baltimore City, nice and chilly, but beautiful. It's been a minute since I've been on the Black Forum. I was dealing with family issues over the last month or so, month and a half. So I decided to come back on tonight to continue going forward with pushing out this message of Black consciousness in an effort to raise the awareness and broaden the consciousness of Black people, because we are living within a crisis. And because we're living within a crisis, we must develop methods and means to address the crises. And if anyone has been following me, listening to me, paying attention to me, one of the things that you would have noticed is that every so often you will hear me bring up the issue of education, Black education, primarily as it pertains to Black children. Black children. And that's one of the things that I want to just get into a little bit of tonight. Talk about the education of Black children. Bibi Fahodier, 7. Bibi Fahodier, glad you can tune in. This is going to be a nice one here. And if you have any comments or questions, please post them. Before I get started, because sometimes I forget to make mention of this, share and like this video. Share and like the video. But yeah, the education of Black children. And one of the things that I've been attempting to get across to us is that education is an act of love. Let me say that again, because that's oftentimes we don't understand. Education is an act of love. In order to educate people, a person, children, or a child, you must possess a profound love for the child, children, people, or person. Because everything after the love is what makes the education possible, because the education is the process by which you are attempting to stir something inside of the person, child, people, or children to bring out of the person, child, people, or children. Let me say it again. The education is what we bring out. The educator, the Mwalimu, the Jegna, the Saber, his or her task is to facilitate the process by which the student or the pupil tap into his or her own unique genius and bring that genius to his or her forefront in utilization for his or her advancement. Let me say that again. Right? Education is the process. It's the process that the educator, which is the Mwalimu, the Jegna, the Saber, engages with the student, to aid him or her to bring out his or her unique genius in such a way that he or she learns how to utilize that genius in the service of himself or herself, family, and community. Education is always a political weapon. Education is always a political weapon. Education is never neutral. It is never neutral. Education is always designed to advance a people. That's the purpose of education. Once you secure your survival as a person, that unique security that you find for yourself must be leveraged to bring your people along. To bring your people along. So, When we think about education from that perspective, we got to ask the question, are our children being engaged that way? Are our children being engaged in such a way that aids them in tapping into or in identifying their unique genius and showing them how to utilize that genius in the service of themselves, their family, and their community, the Black race? Education is always a political tool. Education bases itself in what Henry McNeil Turner uses this term, race patriotism. So the educated person possesses race patriotism. And race patriotism is the mother to the concept of race first. So when Hubert Harrison said race first, Hubert Harrison understanding race first, it grows out of Henry McNeil's understanding of race patriotism. It's the loyalty that one has for his or her race. It's the service that one is willing to set in motion for his or her race, your people. So education is a political weapon. It's a tool of liberation. That's what the education is. And it requires educators to educate. And I'm not using the term teacher. I'm not using the word teacher very intentionally. I'm using the word educator, and I'm not using teacher and educator interchangeably, because I do not believe an educator and a teacher are the same thing. Of the two, I believe the educator is the greatest. For me, I believe we need educators rather than teachers. We need men and women who understand the psyche and the mindset and the spirit of Black children. That's an educator. That's an educator. A teacher can show up and a teacher can show you methodology in a very distant way. A teacher can execute curriculum in a very distant way. But the educator gets in the ring with you. The educator is the man or woman who creates the dance between him and his or her student. That's the educator. The educator is the psychologist. The educator is the spiritualist. The educator is the psychiatrist. That's the educator. The educator is the one who has the culture. The educator is founded within his or her culture. So he or she utilizes the culture as the base from where he or she derives his understanding of the recipient. And in this case, the recipient is the Black child, the Black student. The Black child, the Black student, the Black mind is the recipient of the Black educator. And we cannot perform that task if we're not paying attention to Black children. Black children are being destroyed. Black children are being destroyed. Black children are being destroyed in a very insidious way. In a very insidious way. And we're not talking about it. Black children are being born with more mental disorders than never before. Within the last 25 years, from my observation, I'm 53 years old. So from my observation, I see a spike. There's a spike in the birth of Black children coming to the world with mental disorders, developmental delays, right? That interferes with their ability to perform at high levels. It interferes with their ability to perform at high levels. Now, there are multiple reasons why this is occurring. Multiple reasons. One of those reasons is no doubt a lack of nutrition. A lack of nutrition on the part of the parent. The parent is consuming bad stuff that he or she believes is food. The parents, I'm talking about the man and the woman, right? Because it requires both of them to give birth to that healthy child. Both are involved. You know, his semen is a part of that process. So it's bad food, right? It's poor housing. It's unstructured housing. It's instability in the home. These things are impacting the learning ability of Black children. So when I put a post on Facebook and I say, well, teach your child how to sit still, now, I'm not saying that movement is not necessary. I understand the necessity of mobility. Mobility is built into living and learning and evolving. I'm clear about mobility, but I'm also clear about the necessity to be able to listen to instructions so you can execute tasks. And if you cannot listen to instructions, it's going to interfere with your ability to execute tasks. I am an educator. I've been educating Black young people since 1993. So I've had over 30 years of experience at watching young people learn. And one of the things that gets in the way of our young people learning is they do not take in the instructions well because they're not paying attention, because they're all over the place. They're like this. They're doing things that they shouldn't be doing at this particular time period. Now, I don't have a problem if a child needs to stand up to do his work. I don't have a problem if a child needs to hit a beat to do his work. But the child needs to be able to at least compose him or herself long enough to get his or her instructions so he or she know how to execute the task at hand. He can use his beat. If that's going to help him to execute, have no problem with that. He can use music. In fact, I would encourage using music in the educational process as it relates and pertains to Black children. Because we are nothing but vibrancy and rhythm. And because we are vibrancy and rhythm and dynamism, we should create an environment that's vibrant, full of rhythm, and full of dynamism, so that that environment can sync with the energy that the child is. The child is nothing but energy. The Black child, which is the Black mind, is nothing but Black energy interfacing in a space of energy, right? That's it. And we understood that, we can maximize the development of these children better. Let me say it again. The Black child, which is the Black mind, is nothing but Black energy interfacing in an environment of energy. It's our task to understand that the energy that our child should be interfacing with should be a reinforcing energy that matches their energy and reinforces it and subsequently amplifies it. The amplification of their energy is the development, it's the evolution, it's the progression. The educator, the Black educator, must know this and must understand this in order for he or she to effectuate this within his or her learning environment. If he or she fail to effectuate this, he or she in turn will, in fact, fail those children, Black children. Black children are the Black child is the eternity of the Black race. The Black child is the eternity of the Black race. What we are going to be in 50 years is contingent upon what our Black children are today. Because in 50 years, I will not be here. There's a strong possibility I won't be here. But I could potentially live to be 103. But there's a strong likelihood that I may not be here at 103. So what we are in 50 years is contingent upon what our Black children are today. We need Black educators who understand this. So to be an educator is to have a vision, right? Your focus can't be just now. To be an educator, a Black educator, you must utilize 3 things, among many other things, but these 3 things are very important to be a Black educator. You must have insight. You must have insight. You must have hindsight based on an educational experience. The combination of your hindsight and your insight is what clarifies your foresight. You must be able to receive a Black child, engage him or her in a conversation for about 15 minutes, ask a few questions, put a few books in his or her hand, and then from that initial assessment, formulate where you're going to take him or her, where you're going to take him or her to, and how you're going to get him or her there educationally. You must be able to do it within that 15 minutes to be an effective Black educator. You can determine if a child come to you, a Black child, and he or she cannot read. Within 15 minutes, you can determine if the reason why he or she can't read is linked to something that's physiological and physical, or it's the result because he or she missed basics in the beginning. You can determine that early on. You can determine if the reason a child cannot multiply, you can determine if that's physical, or if it's because he just do not know his multiples. You can determine that early on if you, in fact, is an educator. You can figure these things out early on, and then you know what to do. You know what to do. You know how to take that child from point A to point B to point C to point D and so on. But we cannot neglect the education of Black children. We cannot keep walking around like there is not a crisis in the area of education as it pertains to Black people. There is a crisis out here. We're struggling in the area of education. We're struggling in comprehension. We're struggling mathematically. We're struggling with reading. We're struggling with language and arts. We're struggling with writing, composing sentences. We are struggling in those areas. And we are expecting people to go into a world and succeed. They will not succeed with those deficiencies. They will not succeed with those deficiencies. Those deficiencies must be addressed. And we need the educator to know that he or she is a warrior in a battle, is a soldier in a battle for the minds and the livelihoods of Black children. For the minds and the livelihoods of Black children, you are a soldier in that regard. And like I said early on, education is a function of love. So a Black educator is full of Black love for Black children. You love Black children to educate them. So you are willing to go through what you need to go through with them to get them to where they need to be. You're willing to tolerate. You're willing to exercise patience and understanding with this Black child, because the Black child didn't choose to have his or her deficiency. The Black child didn't choose to not know how to do math. The Black child didn't choose to not know how to read. That's not a choice. That's not a conscious decision to carry that type of deficiency in your life. No. And we need to understand that. Like, they didn't choose this. And because I'm recognizing this deficiency, it becomes my responsibility to do what? To correct it. To correct it. That's what Black education is about. It's about being a person full of love for Black people or Black children. If you're an educator of Black children, then you're full of love for Black children. If you're an educator of Black adults, then you're full of love for Black people. And you're full of love. Why? Because I said it 15 minutes ago. Because you possess race patriotism. That's why. You're a race man or a race woman. And you understand that education is a political tool, a political weapon. Our children are going to either have it or they're not. If they don't have education, then they're going to be what? They're going to be attacked by those who do have their education. And every education is not the same. The white education is not the Black education. The North is the Chinese education. Black education is something uniquely different. And we need to be very clear about that. There is no one standard of education across the board. But if Black children do not have a strong, progressive Black education, they will be in trouble. Let me say that again. If Black children do not have a strong, progressive education, they will be in trouble. It's our responsibility, those of us who possess to know and understand what's going on, to play a part. To play a part. It's not enough to become super sophisticated in how we over critique us, because that's what we do. We become super sophisticated in over critiquing ourselves, always highlighting and magnifying the deficiencies that we have as a people, rather than making observations about these deficiencies and then formulating plans to eradicate them. So yes, I'm talking about the deficiencies that I see in Black education. However, if you paid attention and you listened, you also heard me say what? That I've been educating Black young people since 1993. See, I'm in that war. So I can make an observation from the field. I'm in that war. Every Saturday and Sunday, I am facilitating the Kimoyo Shule Africana, an African-centered weekend school based here in Baltimore City for children ages 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. If you have a strong 7-year-old, I can take your 7-year-old. If you want your child to be immersed in an African-centered education, then send them to Bob M. Hotel, and we're going to get it in. But all of my observations are always based in the field. And all of my observations are always followed with solutions and methodologies that's going to get us to solutions. We can educate these Black children. It don't require a whole lot. You can educate your son, you can educate your daughter, you can educate your niece, your nephew, your grandchild. You can do that. You can facilitate the education of a Black child if you love the Black child. Because education is a function of love. That's what it requires. Love. So if you love your niece, if you love your child, then you can educate your child. And yes, I understand the demands of the society that we live in. I know that the bill man doesn't stop. I know that the bill man is repetitious, and sometimes that become overwhelming. They consistently call on your phone, texting, telling you to pay this bill or pay that bill. I am very clear about all of that. But just because the bill man doesn't stop doesn't mean that you don't have time to put your child on a path of educational excellence. You do. And even if you don't have the time, then have the awareness to partner with someone, organizational person, that will educate your child. But we must understand that education is not something that should be given away freely. Like we think. We think that, well, because this person charging a fee for education, I'm not going to send my child there. And we think that we shouldn't pay for education because of this public education. Public education is a part of the welfare system. And I want us to understand that public education, whether you're getting it through county or the city, it's a part of the welfare system. So therefore, education is something that primarily we are responsible for ourselves. You know, if you do happen to get it through the public city or the public county, that's just a handout. And I'm not calling it a handout to even talk bad about it. I'm trying to make the point that we need to understand that there's a choice there. And we can either choose to send our children to something that's public and may not necessarily get the best, or we can choose to find something that's private, that's going to cost, but yet that's going to maximize the development of our child. That's our choice as parents or guardians. We got to be able to make that choice. And we need to know that if you send your child to someone that has the skill set to maximize your child's educational development, you need to know that that's not an easy task, especially if you're sending a child there that you know your child don't have the discipline to sit still and follow instructions. You know your child. So if you know your child don't have the discipline to sit still and follow instructions, your child is all over the place, and you're sending your child to this particular person, then you know it's a task, it's a challenge for that person. But what allows that person to execute that task is the fact that he or she loved those children. However, because he or she loved those children doesn't mean that he or she should not be compensated if that's his or her business. If that's his or her business, running an independent school, an independent after school program, an independent Saturday school, or independent weekend school, if that's his or her business, then as a parent, you need to respect that business and be willing to pay for that service if, in fact, you know that this person can carry out an excellent service in relation to your child. Education is a value, man, and we got to learn to value it. It's a value that should be built into every black family. Excuse me. Every black family should have education built into it as a value. One of its value systems must be education. And we need to lead by example so our children will seriously know the importance of education. They need to see every adult valuing education. If you want your child to master reading, your child should see you reading. There should be libraries in your homes. Your child shouldn't have the latest technologies if they're not learning in computer engineering. They're just sitting around playing games and video games, but yet they don't have any books. That's a flaw. That's a flaw. That has to be corrected. You want your child to learn how to read, then start reading with your child. Show your child that you can value reading. And even if you can't read, then you have to act like you know how to read so your child can see you doing it, so your child can mimic and emulate you. But I say it all the time, black man and black woman, the world that our children are going to grow up in, I'm talking children that's between the ages of 1 and 12. In 12 years, this particular society, I'm talking about in 12 years, we're in what, 2034? That's just in 12 years, in 2034. Man, this world gonna look strange. It's already strange. It's gonna look stranger, right? And the things that most of our children are gonna be required to do, they're gonna need skill sets to perform these things. So the education, the comprehension is very important. Because I noticed in my as I work with our children, one of the areas that they're most weak in is comprehension. And I always tell parents, one of the ways you can help develop your child's comprehension, if you have a child that reads books and you know your child can read, you can build his or her comprehension by having him or her create their own questions about what they're reading. Initially, they're going to just come up with some basic little simple questions. That's okay. But consistently have them create questions to question their material and then provide the answers for it. If they consistently do that over time, it will begin to build their comprehension. If you engage them in discussion about what they're reading, you're going to build their comprehension. If you help them understand things like that, because it's the comprehension that I'm noticing that's impacting our children's ability to learn. Oftentimes they can't comprehend. And if you send your black child into a school with these white teachers, in most cases that's what they are, white teachers, and then you got other teachers that are there, they don't love the child enough to pay attention to the fact that what they're saying and what the child is saying is a comprehension issue. And it just requires a little bit of patience on their part, or rephrasing some things around that would help that child grasp what they're saying to the child. They don't love them enough to do that. So they just chalk it up as if, oh, that child don't know. He can't learn, or he have a learning disability. They don't even love them enough to inquire, to dive in. They don't possess that type of love. And I want the parents to know that, I'm going to say it again, repetitiously, intentionally. Education is an act of love. If the people or person you're sending your child to don't love your child or the children they're tasked with trying to educate, they're not going to give them the type of energy and time and creativity to help them develop what they came to the world with. They're not going to do that. They're going to push your child along, and they're going to always pathologize your child and say your child is the issue. And in most cases, your child isn't the issue. In most cases, the particular system or the methodology that they're using is the issue. But they're never going to admit that. They're never going to take fault for their inability to teach your child. And you notice I just used the word teach because that's all they can do is teach. They can't even educate. So I'm not even going to equate them with education. The most they can do is teach. They're not educators. Now let me be real clear. Real clear. There are some black educators there are in the side of the system. There are a few of us that spread out there. But the majority of the folk there are teachers who don't love black children. But you do have some educators who have, made their way in there at some levels who actually understand how to educate Black children, but it's not a whole lot, but you do have a few, power, magnificent Black men in Africa, power to you, brother, power, no doubt. My sister Zenzi, Abibi Fahodier, Daddy ain't around in most homes. Yeah, Daddy not around, but we can get around that because our situation is our situation. We got to work with what we got to work with. And we got to keep in mind that yes, ideally we would want the Black mother and the Black father to be together, but in some situations that's not the case. We still have to be able to understand that if it's just me or one person that's there with the child, then he or she must be able to find a way to link up, connect with, or partner up with credible people, credible organizations to aid her in the process of educating her child. Abibi Fahodier, Craig Samuels, Abibi Fahodier race first, my brother. As always, a pleasure. The infamous African, Abibi Fahodier race first. Yes. Just wanted to acknowledge some of the people. So my brother Tyrese in the house. Peace, my brother. Peace, peace. As always, it's a pleasure to have men and women of sound mind joining me. If there's any questions that you want to send my way, please do put your questions in the comment box. It won't disrupt what I'm talking about. I'll make every effort to provide any of you with an answer. But I want to continue to just talk about the education of Black children. It's very important that becomes a priority. And oftentimes you make statements like that, people might come back and say, well, we need to educate Black people, we need to educate Black men and Black women. I am clear that we need to educate all of us across the board. However, my primary focus in this discussion is Black children. In this discussion is Black children, because the education of Black children is going to minimize, and it will not only will it minimize, it will mitigate a lot of the confusions that we see happening within our communities. In most instances, a lot of these confusions are happening with Black children. At some of these basketball games, these football games, the Black children are acting out, and then the parents, fall right in because of their underdevelopment and lack of development and lack of education as well, no doubt. But we can minimize some of this. We just provided our children with a stronger, more progressive education that focuses on them and prioritizes them. So let's talk about the educational institutions real quick. So educational institution, let's take the school system, right? I'm using the school system so I can make a point. So the school system have a number of things, right? The first thing the school system has, it has a curriculum, right? It has a curriculum. It has content that it uses, and the content is systematized into a curriculum. And then the school has an educational philosophy, and then the school has a pedagogy, whatever pronunciation you choose to use for that word. It has those three things. And those three things are actually required in any educational institution. It's going to be, if it's an African-centered education, you're going to have an African-centered curriculum. And like I said, the curriculum is composed of the content that you're going to use. There's going to be an educational philosophy that drives the institution in terms of the vision. And there's going to be a pedagogy. And the pedagogy is nothing more but the educational methodology. The educational methodology. Now, when we think about public education, it already have a jacked up curriculum. But in addition to that, it has a jacked up pedagogy. The methodology is off, right? So even if you changed out the curriculum and put in what one what one would probably call an African-centered curriculum, you will get the same results because the methodology is off, right? To educate something is to educate a child or to educate people requires a type of handling, right? It requires of you to see them in a particular way, to see them some kind of way. And then how you see them rather determines how you're going to relate to them. So the methodology requires you to understand that the recipient requires of you to engage him or her a unique way. You must feel his or her energy to educate him, right? You must feel the energy to educate. So, give an example. You can take an educator, a Black educator, put him in a classroom with an African-centered curriculum, an African-centered educational philosophy, and you can put him in the classroom with children that range between the ages of 12 and let's say 16. He can educate all of them in that classroom and not compromise any of them in doing so. He can educate that 12-year-old and make sure that he or she is getting what he or she deserves at that 12-year-old age. And he can also educate that 14-year-old or that 16-year-old and make sure that they're still receiving what they deserve to get at their age, and none are compromised. Because to educate Black children, they don't necessarily have to be demarcated that way. Now, on some things, we can't make the gap so large, but I'm using 12 to 16 as an example. I wouldn't use 12 and 16. I would do 13 and 15, no doubt. I can do 13 and 15. I would keep 16, 17, and 18 kind of together, and I could do them. The young ones, I can do 8 to 12 and educate all of them and move all of them, right? Because it's about feeling. It's about energy, dynamism, and vibrancy. It's about that 15-minute conversation that I had with each child when I first meet them to figure out where each child is at. So I know how to construct my message to each child. And I know what material is required for each child. But why am I talking about the education of Black children? Because we're not talking about it as a people. We're not talking about it. We haven't made it a national outcry. It should be. It should be a national outcry surrounding the education of Black children. A national outcry. Because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that educationally, we're behind. Doesn't take a rocket scientist. I remember probably about peace, T Savior, peace. Thanks for joining in. It doesn't matter. About 2-3 years ago, here in Baltimore City, about 2-3 years ago, probably was 2 years ago to be exact, but you can look it up. Anything I say, you can look it up. I don't make up anything. I'm not going to tell you a lie. If I speak about a topic, you're not going to see me with a whole bunch of notes because I'm speaking from my heart and my gut based on my experience and what I know. Anything I say, you can research and find it to be true. That's just who I am. I believe in standing in truth. The best way to reach people is be truthful with people. The best way to move people is to be truthful with people, to be committed to your task, to be committed to your craft. And I'm committed to my craft of educating Black people, committed to that, 100%. Now, 2 years ago, approximately, here in Baltimore City, I believe it was about 13 schools. Don't quote me on that number, but it was a significant amount of schools who reported that none of their students were proficient in math. None. About 11 schools. And we talk about Baltimore City, a predominantly Black city. So basically, you're talking about Black children. And we didn't, as a people, we didn't make a national outcry. We didn't make a national outcry. Like we just continue to go. Now, I'm not critiquing nor am I beating down the parents who didn't make a national outcry, because I understand why they didn't make a national outcry. Because most of those parents was probably trying to figure out how to pay a bill, how to keep a light on, how to eat, how to buy some clothing. They probably was, bogged down with all of that. They just didn't have time to focus on the education. So that got by us. And I share this to say that we are confronted with so many issues as a people that it prohibits us from actually focusing on issues that we should be focusing on to improve ourselves as a people. We are confronted with so much unemployment. We are bombarded with unemployed adults who don't have jobs, who don't have skills to get jobs. We have people who say things like, I ain't going to work, you know what I'm saying? I ain't taking no job. They got to pay me $25, $30 an hour. We don't even understand that you're going to get paid according to what you're worth. We have people who only have a high school diploma, who only have that diploma because they couldn't hold them back because they had an IEP. We got people that's walking around who don't have any skills, who are choosing not to work because they say it don't make enough for me because I need $30 an hour. You don't have the skill set to qualify for $30 an hour. We don't understand that. So we're dealing with unemployment as a people. We're dealing with crime as a people. We're dealing with drug addiction as a people. We're dealing with divorce and the breakdown of the Black family as a people. We're dealing with economic exploitation as a people, right? And these things tend to trump the education of Black children, right? So the more and more I can go down that list and label these things, the more and more the education of Black children falls to the bottom of the list. And it falls to the bottom of the list because such a thing called public education exists. Because that exists, that plays a major role in why education isn't viewed as being important. Because we wrongly assume that the city and the county is responsible for educating our child. However, because it exists, I'm not saying that they should not fulfill the function for why it exists. I'm not saying that. I am saying because of its existence, it has confused us around the importance of education. And all other issues tends to trump the education of Black children. And in turn, Black children suffer. And because the Black children suffer, we see these underdeveloped adults that's walking around in our communities, incapable of maintaining family and relationships and holding jobs because they don't have the educational skills to do so. The educational development. Educational development plays a part in maturing you because a part of education is character development, right? To be educated is to be made whole. The academic performance is not the totality of education. The academic performance is just an aspect of what it means to be educated. But also linked into education is how you conduct yourself. So the education that one receives should also develop him as a human being. It should touch him morally, psychologically, and spiritually. He or she should be developed in those areas so that he or she can execute human affairs when called upon to do so as he or she tends to get older. The older you get, no one sees you as a child. No one sees you as being someone that should not do this responsible or that responsibility. The older you get, we expect you to execute responsibilities. But you need to be able to execute these responsibilities. If you don't have the education, you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to do it. If you're uneducated, you're not going to rearrange your child effectively. You're just not. You don't have the education to do so. And that's the truth. Your child's going to be neglected. Education is at the center. Education is at the center of all forms of development. You can't get around it. Where there's no education, there's no development. Where there is no education, there is no development. Does that make any sense, Black man and Black woman? Those of you that still rocking and rolling with me, please let me know that some of this makes some sense to you. Talk back to me. Let me know. How we doing out there? Please share this video, like this video. Like I said early on, the content is what we need. The discussion is very fruitful. So we say Black people in the U.S. is not a racial monolith with one identity and destiny. Black middle to high earnings, America's identity as citizens of USA with the same values as working whites. Working whites, Blacks and working whites. So this is what I would say to that. Whether we acknowledge we are monolith or not, it doesn't erase the fact that we are who we are. And we have to understand it that way, because even within this class analysis, because we can get this class analysis can become very confusing, right? So classism is a reality, but we have to understand class in a different framework. Even the Black people who believe they're part of the middle class isn't a part of white middle class. In philosophy, they're not. Now, even though they may believe it in their head, and even though they may strive to emulate the white ways, which they do, that still speaks to my issue. The reason they believe something that's not true is due to their education. So that's the issue that I'm talking about. So even though they believe that they exist within this thing that we call the middle class, as if this thing, the middle class, is universal. No, the white middle class is the white middle class. Now, the Blacks who think they are part of that middle class isn't viewed as the middle class from the white perspective, even though the Black seeks to emulate them. That's the mistake when it comes to this class analysis. Now, there is class division within the Black sector of society. The Black sector of society does have its degrees of class division. And once again, that's because of the education. If we had the proper education, we would know that we are not divided and don't have to be divided within our own sector, because the totality of the society have already divided us. The society is divided, Black, white, and other. That's the true nature of this society, Black, white, and other. What we tend to do, because we do not have the proper education to properly assess ourselves economically, we falsely and wrongly misassociate ourselves with a segment of society that will never and have never accepted what we call a Black middle class. History does not attest to that. History does not support that. That's our delusion. And because we carry that delusion doesn't mean we have to reinforce that delusion. Part of our responsibility of the educated Black man and Black woman is to challenge that delusion. It's to challenge that delusion, to help us rethink what we think we know. Because in most cases, that analysis is off. So our class analysis, because I don't want people to think I'm not saying that class doesn't exist. There are class divisions within the Black sector, within the Black segment of this society. It exists, no doubt. But it exists because the same reasons what I'm arguing about. It exists because of the miseducation that we have. If we really had the proper education, we would know the truth about who we are and where we are. But since we don't have a proper education, we don't know the truth about who we are and where we are. And since we don't know where we are, we misassociate ourselves with a segment of society that have never and will never accept us as being a part of that segment. That's the reality of our situation. But as always, Black, meaning African, I appreciate your thoughts, my brother, because you keep me thinking and you keep me on my toes. And I love it. My sister Kimmy said this is vital information. Well, I strive to make it as vital as it can be. Make it as vital as it can be to get us moving. When you raise the issue of a lack of a national outcry due to Black educational deficiency, the reason is because most Black people identify as Black Americans with the same values. Oh, I agree with that 100%, my brother. I agree with that. I will not put forth any argument to the contrary. The only thing I would add to it is, like you say in your piece, you say this, you say the reason is because most Black people identify as Black Americans with the same values as white America? Yes. And the reason we make that misidentification is because we are miseducated. But I appreciate that. I agree. I agree. So this is my question to you. For all of us, a larger discussion. Because we know that exists, and because we know that some of those people who make that identification isn't solely doing it from a position of consciousness. Some people are not conscious with that identification. So my question is, do we throw all those people away? Or do we create processes to determine who's consciously choosing to identify with the white race, thereby betraying the Black race? Or do we engage in hopes of raising the consciousness and the awareness of those who may be just caught up in the mix to see if we can pull them out? I'll answer the question for you. In fact, I believe the latter. I believe that it's part of our work, part of our effort to raise the consciousness and expand the awareness of Black people. I believe no matter where they are at, we must engage. We must engage their consciousness. We must engage their consciousness. We must challenge their consciousness. We must make them rethink what they think they know. Those who are Black, who just haven't been able to identify with their Blackness because they've been miseducated, if we do our jobs correctly in terms of political education, I believe some of those will come out of that camp. I believe those who lack race patriotism, as Bishop Henry McNeil Turner once said, I believe those who lack it will stay over there. They will continue to outrightly betray the race. But we have to create the process so we can identify who's who. Because in some instances, some individuals fall on the wrong side, not because I choose to be on the wrong side, because I just don't know. I don't have the knowledge and awareness to navigate the society to truly know where I need to be at. I require a little of assistance. And I believe that is the task of those of us that may say we are Pan-Africanist, Black nationalist, revolutionary, African-centered. I believe part of being any one of those things require of us to engage the people, to stir their consciousness in an effort to raise it. Because I believe the more we can raise consciousness, the more we can begin to trim away at that sector or segment of society of Black people who identify with Black Americans as if they are white, thereby adopting those white values. I believe we can do that. I believe it's about raising the consciousness, engaging the people, bringing them alternative information and knowledge, and truly engaging them, helping them think things through, think things over. I believe we have not had that in a very long time. I'm of the mindset that we need to work towards building a mass movement. A mass movement. By mass movement, I don't mean a gigantic organization. I'm not saying a gigantic organization. I know when you hear mass movement, we start thinking like, oh man, I'm okay where I'm at. No, stay where you at. But we should be aligned on critical issues. And we should be attacking those critical issues nationally. That's the mass movement. And if we as Black African-centered progressives will build more collective institutions, that is enough. Working to raise consciousness on a mass scale is not quantitatively or qualitatively effective. It was effective anything that was effective can be effective. Anything that was effective can be effective. It have been effective. Look at it in the reverse. The reason why we don't have it on a mass scale is because the reverse had been on a mass scale. It's a mass scale of miseducation, and that's been effective. So, but we tend to be too critical. I think we're too critical. And by being too critical, we tend to cut off, what can be done. The Black abolitionists were effective and that was mass consciousness during the 1800s. That was about the Pan-African Congresses. When they got to the African continent, was around the destruction of colonialism. That's mass consciousness. It was effective. There quote unquote, to make an example, the Black Lives Matter spread like that because it was mass. It was effective in terms of spreading an ineffective message, right? Mass movement have always worked. History attests to that. It have always worked. Even in terms of what Shaka Zulu was doing, that was mass movement. Building a Zulu nation, that's mass movement. The same with building ancient Ghana, that was mass movement. The same thing what Nama did in Kemet, that's mass movement, right? History attests to it. We're looking at ourselves from a modern lens. By modern, I mean pretty much post 1968, and we're looking at us like that. We've been crippled a whole lot post 1968, but there's a whole lot history that supports that we can move on a mass scale. Environment shapes consciousness, and so does time and events. We are not in a period of mass struggle like the 1800s, 1950s, 1960s. The mass movement today is the entrepreneurial investment era. Yeah, but that's the point that I'm making. It's happening because we've given up on it. Like, that's the point. We've given up on it. We think it can't work. We think it can't work. The environment doesn't create itself. What I'm saying? The consciousness that comes out of the environment is the consciousness that's injected into the environment. I'm very clear about that. It's the people. It's like culture. Culture is a product of the people struggling, right? It's the people struggling against their environment. Like, history is made by those who push against their environment. History is an act of will and intent. So it's the people that's pushing against the environment to survive in that environment are the ones that create that movement. So it's us. It's what we do. You know what I'm saying? We are the active agents of consciousness. Consciousness doesn't exist outside of us. It doesn't exist outside of us. We are the active agents of consciousness. It's not the environment. What the environment does, right? It presents us with a set of challenges to move against. That's what the environment does. It's contingent upon how we move against those set of challenges that's going to determine how the consciousness will be developed. And as the consciousness is developed, it's contingent upon us to direct it, to move it. That's the work that we have to do. So the mass movement will never die because that's the history of people. That's the history of people. We have always worked in mass movements. That's the history of people moving against their times. We just have to raise the awareness and the consciousness of the times to do so. I remember in the early 1990s, they said that you couldn't go inside here in Baltimore City. They were saying that you couldn't go inside the projects and stop a lot of stuff that was going on. So some brothers from the Nation of Islam created that security force. I forget the name of it, but you can look this up. Man, they went inside them projects with that security force, man, and they changed the whole complexity of the projects because they went in there. The projects it didn't have no social consciousness on the level of nationalism or self-knowledge. Those brothers took it into the projects because they wasn't afraid. They didn't say, well, nothing is going on in there. They don't want anything. They didn't say that. They said that I'm going to go in there and I'm going to change that environment fundamentally. And that's what they did. So I do agree on some levels of what you're saying, but I want you to understand that consciousness exists within us. We are the fundamental agents of consciousness, and we determine the level of consciousness according to how we respond to the challenges that the environment that we find ourselves in presents us with. It's how we respond to those challenges that's going to determine the consciousness. Case in point, when they shoot a brother down in the street, we don't got to respond to that. But if somebody chooses to respond to that, what happens? Something happens. We just don't have the proper agents of consciousness in the midst of that to keep it going the correct way. And I'm not saying it need to be that. I'm using it as an example. I think that the thing that you said early on about us needing collective institutions, I think collective institutions is key, it's critical. It plays a part in that. And I believe those collective institutions can be built across the country over time. I believe we could. I believe as a people we can meet as our ancestors once done. I believe we can meet with the right people. I believe the right people are throughout this country. I believe you got black men and black women who are critically clear as you are and as I am, that's all over this country. We just have to facilitate a way to get us all together into conversation. That's what we haven't done yet. No, correct myself, because I don't want to step on nobody's good work. I'm not going to say we haven't done it yet. I'm going to say we need more of it to be done. You know, we got brothers and sisters that's critically clear over this country. We got to bring them together. We got to figure out how can we connect, how can we link, how can we organize the type of meetings that need to take place so we can organize the work that needs to be done. And then each of us go to do that work. That's mass movement right there. That's mass consciousness. That's what I'm talking about to that degree. That's the reason why I'm calling for, I'm still calling for it. Hopefully I can bring it about, the National Race First, convention, that's going to happen in 2025. I'm still calling for that in hopes that I can bring in, black men and black women that's serious and dedicated to doing this work from all over the world that will show up and we can engage in some dialogue, some real dialogue and organize over a period of 3 days and map out the work that needs to be done. We have to build institutions and space. Yes, I agree, my brother. I agree 1,000%. We must control the spaces. Control the spaces so we can shake the consciousness. You're correct. Yeah, because the institutions are instrumental in that, because we go into the institutions and that's where the consciousness is going to be impacted inside those institutions. Our ideals, aspirations, principles, philosophies, methodologies, mythologies, all of that is inside our institutions. And as we can control those institutions, those spaces, and navigate the people through them, it guarantees that we are manufacturing and shaping and developing the type of consciousness, i.e., the type of minds needed to further the work. As always, my brother, I appreciate your engaging comments and questions. Is now 1 hour and 2 minutes into this discussion. I hope those of you who have joined in here at the School of Urban Philosophy were able to learn something from the dialogue, the discussion. As always, it is my intent, it is my desire to raise our discussions, to raise the awareness, to expand, to provide us with content that we can learn from. So that's why I'm calling on all of you. Help me get this content out. Share the video, share the link, refer a friend, send this video to a friend. Let's get as many people as we can to this channel. Because we can talk about, man, I don't have no informative YouTube out there. There's only a few, there's only a little bit, Man, send folk here, help build the content so we can get this thing going. As always, here at the School of Urban Philosophy, we always straight up, straightforward, and straight to the point. And I will see each and every one of you again next week. So I'm back on track. I've taken care of all the family issues that cropped up over the last month and a half. I'm back on track. So we will be back here again next week, next Thursday at the same time, 9 p.m. Bring a friend and be prepared to join in this discussion. People for Hodier, race first, stay the course, black man and black woman.